Yo, Sleepy Sheepy here. Today we're going to be looking at 100 duels that I ran in the arena, just our highlights, not all 100 duels, and we're going to be doing that with the lock-on feature disabled. So to do that, we can go into settings and go over to button settings, and then just make sure that this has been removed from R3 and set to nothing, and then you can reset it by hitting square before you've kind of opened the menu for it. So this is kind of a neat way to just explore your ability to free aim your weapons. I also decided to run this with power stance katanas or just one Nagakiba and an offhand hand axe. So just kind of, you can do this with whatever setup you want. You probably want to start with something that's going to have some sweeping attacks, just because something like a thrusting sword is fairly difficult to free aim consistently, especially with how fast it is. But we are going to be doing this at level 125. We're going to have 59 vigor, 32 endurance, 55 dexterity, and 20 strength, and then we'll boost that up a little bit with some of the talisman swaps we can do. So the Blessed Dew talisman is going to give us a little bit of regen throughout the course of the fight. We'll also have the Rotten Wing Sword insignia paired with Millicent's prosthesis to boost our successive attacks. So that's going to be pretty nice. And then if we need to, we can go ahead and swap over to the Blue Feathered Branch Sword and the Dragon Crest Great Shield talisman, just to make us a little bit more tanky towards the end game. So that's kind of the setup I went for just my talismans throughout the duration of the fight, and we'll see that. We also have an offhand Hoarfrost Stomped Wakizashi, so this is really nice as a way to just get that last bit of damage towards the end of a fight. I highly recommend it, and I also do have a Frozen Needle that I can swap to towards the end of the fight. So if you need a little projectile, and this is particularly good with free aims, it's a lot of fun to use. You can just use that heavy attack and get some nice damage towards the end. So that's kind of the general setup that I went for. I had a ton of fun doing this. I highly recommend it if you're just trying to up your free aim game and just see how it goes. The fact that you can't lock on, I think, will enable you to just kind of discover how this free aim mechanic works a little bit better. Like, there's certain times in which you're able to not do it, and when you can do it, and just some interesting things happen with the hitboxes when you're doing it. So it's maybe a little bit more of an advanced technique, but it is a very fun one. So anyway, let's go ahead and jump into some of these duels. Alright, so jumping into this first duel, we're going to be playing against a player with a great sword, and that means we're going to need to be very just aware of the hyper armor that they have with their swings and the fact that they can take priority very easily. So what I'm going to be going for are mostly jumping heavy attacks and unsheath attacks, because those are going to poise break this player out of their hyper armor. And really understanding what attacks you have available to you and the poise damage they'll do will make duels so much easier. So we will also note the talisman swaps as well as the fan daggers that come out from my opponent fairly early on, and that's going to be to get rid of the talismans that I'm using to boost my HP, or my damage negation and damage dealt when my HP is full. So that's something that we'll definitely see fairly often, and we'll just be doing our best to swap talismans accordingly. So this player does swap over to the Royal Remain set, and that gives them some regen, gives them a little bit more time and space to deliver lots of attacks, and really it's only my game to lose at this point. Like, I want to make sure that I play aggressively enough so that I can get chip damage in periodically, but I also need to be aware that they can really take priority very easily with their set. So moving on to this next one, we're going to see a player that's running power stance thrusting swords, and I'm going to swap over to my Bullgoat talisman very early on to avoid getting poise broken from every single attack, because the armor that I'm wearing does allow me to hit 109 poise with the Bullgoat talisman on, and that is necessary if you're playing against one-handed thrusting swords in any capacity. So we're able to tank some of their hits. We're also going to be able to trade more successfully with them. We're doing some chip damage with the offhand Wakizashi, with Hoarfrost Stomp, and just some normal swings. Those come out very, very fast, and it is very helpful to get that little bits of chip damage in once you get your opponent to low health. Now, next up we have a player that's running a Halberd and Offstock. So again, because of the Offstock, we're going to need that 109 poise and need to swap over to our Bullgoat talisman. And this player can definitely mash kind of hard with their setup, but we're going to try to take advantage of their fairly horizontal move set. So jumping over our opponent is going to be great, and then also being able to punish their Storm Assault with our Unsheathed Ash of War is going to be fantastic, because that has really good range, and even though we'll take some damage in the process, it will out damage our opponent since they missed the initial Storm Assault. So we now have the Nagakiba, and we're two-handing it with an offhand hand axe. So this was a slight variation of the build that I was running in some of the earlier duels, and just part of the unlock challenge that I was going for. And we can see some of the pokes. They're fairly hard to aim while unlocked, so that is something to be aware of, but we are able to trade with our Unsheath Heavy and then pull out our offhand axe, just trying to get some chip damage. So again, this is a much more optimally played build from the way that I approach each of these duels. Like, a lot of times in duels, I will be a little bit more chill and not really trying to go for the win every single time my hardest, but these were much more with that play style in mind, where I tried to be very patient, I tried to talisman swap optimally, I tried not to rush in too much, and then if my opponent was low, I was going to do what I could to chip them within like the confines of my build. So this is definitely sweatier than I normally go for, and that's largely in part because I'm going to be playing in an off-meta tournament a little bit later. So March 2nd, I believe, at 2 p.m. Heartbreaker Jaker is hosting a tournament that I intend to be playing in. So this is really tournament practice for me a little bit, and I'm just trying to do my best to learn how to play like a tournament player would, where you really want to be conscientious of all the damage that you take. You want to be deliberate with every single attack. You kind of don't want to be just throwing things out randomly. And it requires a level of kind of focus that I don't normally play with, and I found it's very fun to play like this, and has helped me improve a lot. And so even with this whole like no lock-on thing, that's also been helping me improve a lot. So even a player, rocking Shunter, we can still come out with a victory even though we're running some fairly off-meta stuff, like a two-handed Nagakiba. While decent against Shunter, the hyper armor that Shunter gets like that should win, most of the time. So having just different things available to us, like this is a setup where I should absolutely lose this duel just based on the range that the Nagakiba has. Like the Uchigatana does have a little bit more damage, but the range on the Nagakiba is quite substantial, and they should be able to pressure me from a distance. And so this is really me just focusing on fundamentals to try to outplay these opponents and really learn these weapons in a way that I haven't totally, done before. So kind of back to what I'm going for here, because I know that I can't outrange this player, the whiff punishes are going to be huge. So getting a read on the crouching attack and being able to punish it with a jumping attack is super important in a moment like that, and does enough damage to kind of come out with the victory. So here again we have a player running a great sword, and this is going to be potentially problematic because of the hyper armor that they get against our weapon. Again, we'll be focusing on stuff like backstabs, the jumping heavy attack, the unsheath attack, and not really going for too many attacks that aren't going to poise break, because it's going to be very hard to really avoid hyper armor trades, which is the biggest issue against playing against a great sword, and they're going to out damage us if they are in hyper armor. So going for an unsheath there, we get a ton of damage, and that puts us in a great spot. This player is now in kind of a bad spot where if they trade with me, they will take enough damage in the process, and so we can get a nice crouching attack for a trade and come out with the victory there. So now we have a Colossal Sword player, and again, the hyper armor is going to be problematic, so lots of jumping heavies, maybe regular heavies. Running heavies are also kind of helpful. Here we got a fantastic moment where we were kind of in a crouch state because of our swing, and their Ash of War went over our head, which was great. And then here we can see this nice roll-in backstab. Roll-in backstabs are so much easier when you're playing completely unlocked. They're nearly impossible without unlocking, but when you've already, kind of positioned yourself in an unlocked way, it's pretty great. So again, we have a player with his Zweihander. We're able to get a nice neutral jump on them with a heavy attack and poise break them in the process. We're going to go ahead and swap our talismans as well, get a little regen going. And this is something to be aware of if you are playing like this. You definitely can get back backstabbed. Whenever you try to run away or especially roll away, that does set up your opponent for a backstab. So you can see early on my opponent did get a backstab grab, and so just rolling is much more dangerous when you're playing completely unlocked. Normally you'd want your character to be facing your opponent while you roll so you don't get that backstab set up for your opponent. But we do manage to get in some nice damage. As they go for a backstep, we're able to get a crouching attack to finish or get at least a decent amount of damage. They go ahead and swap their talismans as well as their weapon over to a curved sword, and the curved sword is a very hard matchup with the Nagakiba, or the Uchigatana rather, because the swings are so much faster and the priority that they're able to maintain is so substantial. So we're just kind of backing off a little bit. Again, my approach in this instance is that it's my game to lose, so I need to be playing kind of patiently and really be going for either quick attacks or ranged attacks. So pulling out Hoarfrost Stomp is going to be a good way to get a little bit of chip damage. Also can potentially bait aggression. The recovery on the Hoarfrost Stomp is really, really fast. So a lot of times they'll come in for a jumping attack, you'll be able to roll out and then potentially punish in that process, or they'll jump and land and be in their recovery frames and still get hit by the Hoarfrost Stomp. So it's a great way to finish your opponent. Next up we have a player with the Zweihander, and we can see how much range they get. So definitely some phantom range, not the perfect connection between both of us, and it was a very smart call of them to go for that running heavy initially, and not a smart call of me to not roll it and thinking I could space it before I even remotely understood our latency. So here we do get a nice little crouching attack. So the crouching attack does come out extremely quickly, and obviously is very well, it's just the attack you get out of a roll. So being able to roll in and go for that attack and then roll out before their swing with a slower weapon like this can be beneficial for getting little bits of chip damage in, kind of working around the hyper armor. Now next up we have a player that's running a parry dagger, and we can see these kind of free aimed attacks being quite useful here, where the jump over the player, even though we ended up being over their head, we were able to turn around in time and still get the heavy attack off. And then once they go for their Ash of War there, that sets us up in a great position to go for Unsheath with some pretty good spacing and get it to connect for the finish. So this next player is running a curved sword, and I'm not 100% sure if they were light rolling or not, but they definitely look like they have a light roll build going on, and we're not going to be able to catch up with them successfully with this build. The Nagakiba does have a decent amount of range, but with light roll in the mix, it's pretty hard, and they're also doing a decent job of playing aggressively, which we like to see from anyone that has those extra iframes. So we're kind of waiting impatiently. They're coming in for a lot of jumping attacks, so we can go for that Unsheath L2, or heavy attack rather, and potentially knock them out of the air. That's something that's on our mind. And because they have low poise, we can definitely catch them for multiple swings and get a lot of damage and poise breaks in the process. So here we do get a punish on the jump. They're playing quite predictably with those jumps and get the freezing pot off. That's also going to boost our physical damage, which is pretty nice. Now they do come in for the jumping heavy, which does have 2 swings, which is a little bit scary, but this time we space it and successfully get Beast's Roar off and get the connection for the victory. So that was kind of just an interesting player and a bit of a challenge, especially while free aiming. So this next one is going to be, again, a big hyper armor potential issue, and something we're going to be trying to focus on. They have the ability to block, which means that they can kind of set themselves up either for a guard counter, or we'll just get a lot less damage off because, we do have lightning infusion, which is going to help deliver more damage in this situation, but it's still going to negate a lot of our damage. So we go ahead and make the decision to switch over to something with Impaling Thrust, because Impaling Thrust is going to do damage even if they are blocking. And here we kind of wait for the roll and get ourselves set up for a nice Impaling Thrust that does go through their shield, and then we just toss a Frost Pot and we do get that to connect even with the free aim. So that was just kind of a nice way to adapt to an opponent that's playing with a pretty tanky build. Next up we do have another Shunter, so this is again a very difficult matchup. The Nagakiba does have some nice speed associated with it, but again, we really need to be getting the poise breaks. That's kind of the name of the game against the shunter, and you don't have like a huge number of different attacks. Obviously, having the different L2s, or the different heavy attacks and light attacks associated with Unsheath is going to be quite helpful. So you can kind of go for slightly different timings. You have an anti-air option, you have a nice wide sweeping option. Those things are both very nice. Here we get a couple of swings in that does a lot of damage, and that's huge. So here you can see the issue of when we try to trade with the shunter, it's out damaging us, and they're doing a great job of catching up on health. But those first couple swings did a ton of damage, and we're actually able to get them as they run away with the Hoarfrost Stomp. So again, a great finisher, and they were probably in their menu, and it's a great way to punish players that are, you know, potentially in their menu before they're far enough away. So just having that option is really nice. We also have a player with a ton of hyper armor, and really that's kind of just the theme of what people are running these days in the arena. Like, there were some people that didn't run super hyper armor focused weapons, but it's fairly easy to be successful with hyper armor these days. So it's a bit of a challenge to play against it, and a good way to kind of learn some good fundamentals here. So here we can see this opponent taking priority with their Iron Cleaver, and we can see that I do in fact need to back off there after I take a trade, and that's definitely the play there, because they're going to continue to break my poise, and I will not continue to break theirs after you know, a number of R1 mashing. So this player is also, again, running hyper armor. They do have Barbaric Roar in the mix, so we're going to try to go ahead and space that. Here we can see, even though I did get that to connect in terms of the blood loss buildup, the latency between us is quite bad, so they didn't take any damage. So I'm going to need to try and get my hits out a little bit early. Again, we can see a successful connection there, but no damage. And here we break their poise and back off. If we had gone for our backswing in that moment, we would have lost priority. So it just made sense to back off. You can do things like block cancel, so you kind of get your R1-1 is what they call it, when you get that first swing of your R1 repeatedly. So you can block cancel, go for R1 block, and that will be a great way to just kind of maintain priority, but it is a little bit slower. So again, we do see some fan daggers coming out early on just to get rid of the advantages we have with our talisman. So we want to go ahead and swap those, and then we can go ahead and hop in as well. Now, CGS is very scary these days. They are running an offhand weapon, so they aren't going to get the same hyper armor that they would if they were not, but it still does quite a bit of damage. They start getting aggressive, and we're able to just use the speed of our weapon to get a little bit of damage off pretty early, and then we do kind of roll out after their jumping attack, and we're just trying to space them, potentially going for some anti-airs as they come in for a little bit of aggression. We're able to hit them with Unsheath, which is great, but our health is pretty low, so we're going to go ahead and swap our talismans over and go for some Hoarfrost Stomp, which is a great way to just discourage your opponent from getting super aggressive at a distance, or it can bait them to be a little bit too aggressive. So it kind of puts them in a weird spot, and it is a really nice Ash of War, especially when you have it as a soft swap from a weapon like, you know, a dagger or something. Those two together can be really nice, and you know, you can just kind of switch from something very long range and quick to short range and even quicker, and back and forth there. So eventually we do kind of bait them in for that jump. We're able to roll out in time, and the Hoarfrost Stomp does connect for the rest of the damage. Now, next up we have a player that's running a Great Lance, and this is going to be a little bit scary. They do have a decent amount of range, but they are a little bit slower. So here we're able to actually whiff punish their jumping attack with a nice Unsheath, which does come out very quickly, and then a neutral jump is enough for us to be successful. So I would be lying if I said that I ran 100 of these duels and didn't lose any of them. So this is the same player. They've swapped over to a curved sword setup, and again, this was a setup that I had a very hard time with. Thrusting swords and Shamshir right now are probably some of the strongest weapons in the game. Their ability to whiff punish, their ability to maintain priority is very, very strong, and they actually do pair well with the power stance moveset as well for both of those weapons, I would say. So we get in a decent amount of damage pretty early on, and then we start getting aggressive, and we get caught by both the initial hit and the backswing twice. And then here, as we go for a talisman swap, they do a great job of maintaining aggression and going for a running L1. So really nice job from that player. I certainly lost a number of these, but I wanted to kind of show the highlights of ones that were successful since this was a little bit funny. And then, speaking of funny things, we have one last duel with an AFK player. Well, I was running a totally different build, but I just found this to be funny. So I'll go ahead and let this play out. I'll plug my my different stuff that I have going on. If you wouldn't mind considering subscribing, I definitely appreciate it. And I do have a second channel where I do some like no-hit runs and do some PvE type stuff called Casually Sheepy, so that's linked in the description if you want to check that out. But yeah, that's all I've got to say. If you like this type of content, let me know. This is new for me. I don't usually post only duels, but I found this to be kind of entertaining and thought it might be a good piece of content. So yep, anyway, take care and have a good one.